I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. It's 8:30. We do have a quorum. Kath, I'll go ahead and let you take roll call. I do know that Mr. Sager will not be in attendance today. I'm assuming Mr. Hendricks will arrive after he does his court call, and we'll see where Kelly is.
Wagner, Sager, Kunkel,
Here.
Hendricks, Campbell,
Here.
Shorten,
Here.
Altalk.
Here. Thank you very much. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes? Seeing from Board Member Campbell, seconded by Mr. Kunkel. Any revisions, comments, changes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Moving on, we don't have any public comment. Member comments. Anybody have anything for the go to the order this morning? Nothing. Excellent. Moving right along. Moving on. New business. We have no new business. And so we'll go to legislative update, which is really cool because we get right to the solar stuff, which you kind of sort of wanted to talk about. I'm going to distribute information that the Planning and Development Department, thank you to Adam and Renee for their unbelievable work in putting this together. I want you to, you got it? I want you to see where we are with regard to solar farms and some of the suggestions I'm going to have with regard to not being helpless. But Norm, do you want to talk about where we are with the update, the legislation, the trailer bill that did pass both houses but has not yet been signed by the governor, which was again the reason for Joe Gadamaller's motion, is because we anticipate that the governor is going to sign the trailer bill. So it was definitely in order so that we're up to speed. But go ahead, thanks.
Yeah,
Norm, you want to come up here?
Sure.
Just so people can hear.
Yeah, good morning. In all candor, I have not digested that trailer bill yet. But what I'd like to do is then get a memo out to you that gives you kind of anything that's changed from that initial bill. One of the provisions I know is just a longer time frame for the county to take action from 45 days, I think it was, to 60 days. In all candor, I've not had time to digest that bill to tell you whether anything has changed with respect to putting term limits or a limiting time or on the bonding issue. But I'll get a memo out to you within the next 2 days and I'll send it to Pam if that's okay, and if you want to distribute it.
And I took a cursory glance at the trailer bill, and that is the substantive changes with regard to solar farms. Yeah. There were other changes, but didn't really relate to that specific issue. And I think you guys know that the reason that the legislature took this action was because that many other counties were finding every reason underneath the sun to deny requests. What you have in front of you is that McHenry County since 2018 has basically approved just under 3,300 acres of solar farm. I don't think that that's what was anticipated, and in talking to both of the sponsors in the House and in the Senate, again, McHenry County is somewhat of an outlier when it comes to this issue. So what I would like is, further discussion. And I'm going to appear at McCog Wednesday morning and ask that they be prepared, not that they take any action because I haven't got permission from the board. This is just cursory kind of information and figuring out where we are. But I want to explain that this really is somewhat specific to county legislation, not units of local government, and that there may be a need for McCog to give the county the authority to gain access to those lobbyists on this specific issue. What I'm going to suggest, again, with your concurrence, and we'll present it to the board, is that we try and work with the bill sponsors and find some threshold that says if you exceed X amount of acreage, if you exceed X amount of number of applications, some threshold that then would allow a county to have a little bit more authority and regulatory oversight, because we've already, accommodated. Now, in speaking to Mr. Vinton this morning, all of those agreements on this sheet that were approved prior to the passage and implementation, which was
Right.
January 1, 2023, right? They are still subject to the terms and conditions that were laid out when we approved them. So it's only those that came in 2023 that we don't have that kind of bonding authority, et cetera, right?
Right.
Okay, so, in the discussion, what I want you to look at is the discussion about, oh my goodness, this goes on in perpetuity. Most of these properties are leased. Only 5 were outright purchases of property. Everything else was a lease with the property owner. So even in my estimation, even in decommissioning or concerns, you still have access to the landowner, who, by the way, is receiving huge amounts of money, to allow the solar farms. So I don't feel necessarily that I'm invading personal property rights, which obviously are extraordinarily important to most of us. So I'd like to investigate this a little bit further with your concurrence and input, specifically with regard to being able to, potentially bond maybe at a higher amount than the 100%. Maybe 150 is too high, but there's got to be a sweet spot somewhere in there. And then I also would like somewhere in all of this, particularly in light of the number of acres that we've already approved, and I'm going to look at you, Pete, because I'm not really good at this, but to ensure that McHenry County can still grow and gain access to all of that power on the grid, as opposed to it going somewhere else, and somehow we don't get access to that. And I know just enough to be dangerous about that. And so there's nothing in any of these provisions that kind of cover the need to always have that kind of study and figure out where we are with that service provision. So I wouldn't want somebody like a Scott Forge that has been around for a long time, that draws significant power, to be denied access when we're the solar capital of the world, right? So those are the kinds of things that I would like a little bit more access. And again, you can see the leasing. Maybe we do a better education too of some of those property owners, and just let them know what our concerns are so they can address it themselves when they're entering into some of these agreements. But I thought the information was extraordinarily important.
An interesting thing, you look at this, no applications in 2022, because apparently these solar farms or solar developers knew it was coming.
That's what they were working on.
Yeah.
Absolutely, that's what they were working on. I mean, it's been an issue, and solar is going to probably be, again, my understanding, it's significantly cheaper, and it allows, again, landowners to retain ownership of that property while it's obviously being rented out to a significant development. So, Mr. Short.
My 2 cents or 10 cents probably. I've been doing a lot of digging and research and trying to understand, obviously we have national and statewide goals to get to zero emissions by 2050, and solar and renewables seem to be the path that the state is taking. Whether I agree with it or disagree with it, it's irrelevant. This is the path they're taking. This is very enlightening. The fact that we've approved 3,300 acres, based on the understanding that I've put together about, and I've asked Pete to get me some data as far as how much energy is consumed in our entirety in the county. But, based on some real high-level data, it would look to be about 4,000 acres would supply our county's electricity. So when we talk about another trailer bill, to account for the fact that we've already been very progressive in our approval of these solar farms, I would think that acreage would be a good limiter, or percentage of utilized electricity. So now that, yeah, and that number is gonna change, because the move towards zero emissions is not only the generation of electricity is going to involve the changing of how power is consumed, because I drove in, I see somebody has a new Tesla. Congratulations if they're in this room. Still above my price range, but I'll get there maybe, or they'll get to me, not sure. But it comes to, if we're going to pursue these zero carbon emission goals, it's going to be a broader, I think the term was electrification, is going to have to take place within the country. So combustion-powered engines are going to, by 2050, be a thing of the past. So the capacity for electricity is going to need to increase as well. So I think that I like the acreage because it's a little bit more of a limiter, whereas if you put it on strictly kilowatt hours as a percentage of total consumption within the county, you open the door a little bit where, let's say right now 4,000 acres supplies the entire county, and we say, okay, can we put a limit to 8,000 acres? Okay, great, that's 8,000 acres. We've got 215,000 acres of farmland, I believe, in the county. So, you know, that limits that. So that's kind of my 10 cents, 15 cents. I'm not sure.
No, we're all kind of following, I think, the same thought pattern. I understand that our location is extraordinarily desirable because of our proximity to one of the main lines, and obviously, if I'm a solar farm operator, I'm looking at the cost of gaining access to that. So obviously, we're going to get those requests. I mean, that's just undeniable. If we want to go to a renewable energy source, we have to play in that sandbox. All I'm asking for is the availability at a certain point when we have X amount, is for the county to be able to have better oversight on what else comes in ensuring that, you know, so that's all I'm suggesting. I'm not taking away the availability of people trying to locate solar farms here.
Sure.
I just want to have, again, perhaps a little bit more regulatory authority.
Yeah, and I think too, from a regulatory authority standpoint, you know, we're in 2023, 2050 is a long way off. God willing, I'll still be walking the planet. But there are, you know, there are other existing sources of electricity that I know we a little bit touchy about nuclear, but hydroelectric is also emerging. Combinations of nuclear and hydroelectric, solar and hydroelectric. So, you know, what I'm hoping is that there's a balancing point where obviously solar farms take up a lot of space. Personally, it's visual pollution as far as I'm concerned. Wind farms, in my personal opinion, are talk about distracted driving with cell phones. I'm driving through an area with the windmills going. I'm hypnotized. Suggest anything to me and I'll do it. So, of the two renewables, I prefer the solar, but again, I think we need to allow for the fact that technology and the world is changing rapidly, which I think is hopefully a good thing.
And that's why, again, Mr. Kunkel next, that's why I gave you the terms of the leases.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you notice, most of them are 25, 30 years.
Yep.
So, and I think it's exactly, Michael, to allow that kind of consideration. They too are looking to the future. Mr. Kunkel?
The hypocrisy of the whole thing, of course, if you table all the humanitarian issues, the children in the mines, the fact that all of this stuff is toxic pollutants that we'll have to get rid of, if you table all of that stuff, you're still looking at the fact that we are taking food off the table, because as we take these acreages out, we are producing less food from those pieces also. I guess I'm really okay with if we limit that amount of acreage. But we all have to know that we are the last line of defense for McHenry County. And right now, all we are doing is defending them from an experiment. This is only an experiment. I've talked to several engineers, electrical engineers, who said the technology is still not caught up with it. They said all of these that are leased out, engineers' words, not mine, 15 or 20 years, the panels, the inverters and the batteries will all be obsolete, gone, before they can pay for the, and you want to talk about a carbon footprint that it took to build all these things in China and how dirty all that stuff was, and then we're going to clean the mess up. Kind of like nuclear. Nuclear looks like it's advancing well for everybody in the world for the future, but we do have mountains and mountains of nuclear spent fuel and buried, stacked in the desert. We'll have these same solar panels. So we need to protect McHenry County in what limited ways we can to mitigate this footprint right now that we already know is insufficient to even zero its own carbon footprint, much less 50. And in 50, all of this stuff will be in the trash and will be hopefully renewing with someone who has a better technology at that point. So again, since this is experimental, I think we need to put the collars on as close as we can. I don't care for the 8,000 acres. I don't mind the 4,000 acres. You could push me to 5. I still don't like that, but I realize this experiment is coming. Springfield has put this experiment on us. On top of that, this engineer, the 2 engineers I talked to are out of St. Louis, and they're engineering actually for these people also. They said our area in the north here, in the northwest here, is not conducive for solar gain, even if these panels and even if this equipment was up to date to last 25, 30 years. We just don't get enough, as you look out today, we don't get enough Sundays to make any of this pay. So great, they're using McHenry County, being facetious, as an experiment, but we must mitigate the size and the footprint of that experiment.
Any comments, Carol?
Wow, I mean, it's really complicated, right? Because, I mean, I think that it's just, we are concerned about the farmland. We've been talking about, I guess I pulled this out. I must have had this from the RPC, but this is a visual of where the solar farms are as of November 2022. So kind of can see where they're all at. You know, it gets complicated because each and every one of these solar panels, we talk about that giving up farmland. I personally would advocate for getting these things on the buildings everywhere and anywhere they can be. I mean, we had conversations last year. Jeff Schwartz had been overseas, and I had already read about this, but he talked about in Italy, they have them over in parking lots, you know, because those are carbon sinks. Great place to park your car, because now you can park in the shade. You're not driving around for that one little tree. And there's just different ways to do it. There are complications, I mean, in terms of storage for those times when it's not producing. I mean, we have panels in our house, and we produce, and we have an electric car, and we produce 75% of our electrical needs by ourselves. But we're connected to the grid, and then we, you know, there are times when we need to have that. So the problem with, you know, limiting, I mean, if you talk about taking land out of production, it's far better to take it out of production for a solar farm, because in 30 years, when you decommission, the soil is going to be in better shape anyway, and now can go back into farming versus that person deciding. I mean, for a lot of these people, this is an investment. And we've sat in PED all the time where we talk about, you know, we don't want to do anything that tells people what they're going to do with their property. I mean, we were having a conversation about landmarking historical structures. You know, what do you do for that person? Once you do that, now they've got to maintain the building. And so we have these conversations about property owners' rights. And if people are making these investments, and only 5 have been purchased outright, that means the landowner is interested in getting more money for their land than what they can get in farming. So, I mean, if we limit in some cases, we could be limiting the number of solar farms, and then they just go develop with something else altogether. And then we don't get it back in 30 years. So, and you're right, in 25 years, they're going to, you know, maybe the panels are like this size for all the big ones are now this size, and you don't need the amount of space that we're taking right now. So I don't know, I think it's complicated, I need more time to think about it, everyone's making great points about where we're at and how sustainable it is. Battery storage is a big one. I would say everything that we've ever done that to live as people has created huge environmental catastrophes, whether it's decommissioning these panels or cleaning up the coal mines or all the oil spills that we've had. I mean, we as people we create disasters in our wake. And, you know, hopefully that, I don't know the technology, I would hope that there's a way to, as these are decommissioned, that they're not just thrown in the trash. That would be horrible. But, so, I mean, this is the start of a process of trying to figure this out. I know where you're trying to go with this, and that is we're showing that we haven't been denying people the opportunity to do this, so that we shouldn't be held to this very strict standard. We've been doing it this well as a county. We should have more autonomy over how we regulate them. And I think that's really where
That's where I'm going.
that's where you're headed. The other stuff is very complicated, and I think we'll take time to talk it out and figure out what to do.
I agree, yeah.
I'm not trying to get too far in the weeds emotionally in this. That's what I'm trying to say. Where is that? What are the colors? What can we do? Can we say, give them an acreage limit? Can we do any of those things?
Right now, as it currently sits,
Right.
I would say no. Yeah, no.
So right now, you know, we have to actually expedite this kicking and screaming to pass our feelings up to
That's what I'm telling you. I've
Springfield.
spoken with both of the sponsors of the legislation, and we're talking about trying to see if there isn't a threshold where at a certain point they would acquiesce to a county and allow them to have more latitude in regulating, you know. It probably won't be much, but it might be something. And all I'm doing right now, Matt, is trying to get a feel and a concurrence so that during a report to the board, I would ask that we pursue this as part of our legislative agenda and have something for October, November veto, if that's possible.
But not sensationalizing, not trying to sensationalize it. The way the law is, from what you're saying written now, we could have solar people coming in here right and left, and they could just eat up all 200,000 acres of our background.
Yes.
And we have no say in this.
That's absolutely
Does
correct.
anybody else feel like this is a problem? I mean, we really should be able to get the oomph that it takes for our county to regulate itself to a degree, yes? No?
Is there, sorry,
Go ahead, Michael, please.
do we have any data as to, so are these are all solar farms that have been approved? Have they been built?
Can I ask, Renee? 5 have been built.
5?
Have been built or are under construction.
Thank you.
And do we know, and I'm asking a question that probably doesn't have an answer, but do we know the...
Can I ask a favor? I'm real sensitive to people who might even not be, but might be watching. Can I ask you guys to come up to the table? Thank you. Having been always one of those people listening in, I know how awful that is. You can't do it.
So we only have 5 solar farms that have been built. We have 30 odd that have been approved. Do we know what the I guess process or time frame that these I guess leaseholders and owners of the solar farm or the property, the process they go to actually growing the farm, I suppose?
I'm not. I don't.
I can speak to a little bit of that only because I have people in that line of
Yeah.
construction. Right now, this electrical engineering firm in St. Louis is inundated, right, from around the country
Right.
for developing, basically schematically drawing these solar farms based on separate footprints. They have to design all the carry, how far it's going to carry to where it's going to distribute, how much of battery life. They design all of that stuff. They put on 5 new engineers who sit in the company, and that's all they do is solar right now. They're doing millions and millions of dollars. Their company is just growing like, they can't get electrical engineers fast enough to do these solar designs fast enough. So we already have this little swedge in the pipeline now, because the engineering is second step. Legislation was first, but the engineering is second step before these guys can manufacture and then build these actual sites. So there is a slowdown happening right now, not by our regulations, but it's happening. There's just not enough electrical engineers to meet the kind of dollars that were thrown at this overnight. We have that little bit of time to scream and holler to make something happen.
A question, and again, clarification. All of those solar farms that we approved prior to 2023 still fall within the McHenry County original regulatory scope, so that we have the 150% bonding, we have all of that in place.
All
That
of
does
those
not change.
all
So
of
it's
those
only-
conditions.
It's only, how many were 2023, 12? Maybe, did I count? I don't remember. But it's only those that we kind of lost that control over, right?
Well,
Okay. And then, did this, I think I asked, does this list include the 6 or 7 that we have in the hopper that we know are still coming forward?
I think they include most of them, yeah.
Okay, okay.
I recognize a couple of them on here already.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe they are.
Okay.
5, 6, 8.
Okay. So Carolyn, I'm sorry, didn't.
No, but we really didn't have any mechanisms in place to limit the amount of acreage.
Still don't, yeah.
No,
Yeah.
we still don't, and this actually just made it harder for us to do that, right? So, but just in, I mean, we kind of, yeah, we didn't have those limitations prior to.
No, and I don't know if we'll ever be able to do that. I just don't know what, I mean, if the county can limit somebody's usage of their property. And I don't know if I even want to do that.
So let's just enter a scenario where the state says, okay, we're going to give the county back control, which I know. Could we potentially change the land use for A1 agriculture to not include solar?
Well, right now, the state law, I think, is pretty clear that in any ag district and industrial district, the county can't place a moratorium. You have to allow solar
It's very
in those
clear.
2 zoning
Okay,
districts.
and that requirement existed prior to this public act?
No, this is in the public act.
Right, I'm saying if the state, I get fantasy world, they acquiesce.
They don't know this, I mean, they couldn't opine, I couldn't opine, and I was part of state government on what they would do or wouldn't do.
Right.
I'm going to look at you and tell you, I doubt very strongly that the state of Illinois will reverse its decision to allow solar and ag and industrial zoning.
Okay.
I highly doubt that. I think that quite honestly, asking, which is why I wanted this conversation here, asking to hit a level
Right.
of the, potentially the zoned property, the zoned ag and industrial property that you have in your county. If you hit this level, then automatically the county would have more ability to have oversight because you've already accommodated X, right?
Right.
That's what I'm suggesting. I think that that's possible.
Mhm.
I don't know if we're gonna roll back anything else. My comment to you is I strongly doubt it.
And I'm not suggesting
I got you.
a rollback, but perhaps it says once we hit that threshold, whether it's acreage or kilowatt hours or what have you, then, and again, maybe the state wouldn't do this, but then they would grant us the authority to have that control. We could change an A1 land use to remove solar. I mean, because I would say, for me, if we got to a point that we were producing, I'm throwing out a number, 200% of energy use via solar, or we had approved solar farms that would equate to that, I'd have a difficult time, looking forward and say, okay, we no longer, for the state, statutes have to approve solar, but we're gonna keep doing it anyway. I would say if we have, again, 200 or 8,000 acres, I'd say that's, a pretty good number for me.
Yeah, I got that. Matt and then Carolyn, please.
Okay, so we don't beat this dead horse any more than we're beating that nice. See, we're losing everybody here. The two places that I think we have to hunt are, we should limit the ag property, and I think we have some leverage that way, being ag, and the reason that we should limit the ag acreage, and we need to look again at that percentage to clean up the mess.
The bonding, I
The
think
bond.
that, yeah.
So those are the two components that I think we have to push with. We could get way out in the weeds, but I think, again, stop beating this dead horse. If everybody is in concurrence with that, I think those are the two avenues we go at hardest now.
And that was actually the conversation that occurred at the board level too. It was those two points.
And I think it's probably our only very, very flimsy leg to stand on.
Carol?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, getting back to the preservation of ag land, I mean, this is something we're trying to wrestle with at RPC, right? And, the bottom line is, if we tell them they can't do solar, then they can do anything within whatever, and we have these conversations all the time about the property rights, of the owner. And so, part of this will ultimately include, let's talk about farmland trusts, and can we get developmental rights, right?
Yeah.
So that they get the developmental rights,
5 years ago, yeah.
money, like they do this in Kane, but they have casinos that help pay for that, right? But, so that we can have that protection, because we do need farmland protected, but we're gonna have to get really innovative how we do that, because we can't just say no in the end, right? So it's real important that we figure it out. So, and you're right, that's in the weeds, and we have a lot of time for that, but.
And we did note that Ms. Wagner has joined us, correct, Kat? Thanks. So if we get that, you're right, let's not beat a dead horse, but if there's some concurrence that we should pursue.
Yeah.
So I'd like to take this back to the chair and just notify everybody that it's something that legislatively we're going to pursue, whatever that means. And ultimately, my thought is if you can get the original bill sponsors to sign on to something, that usually makes it a lot easier to go through both chambers, but we will also invite our local legislators to sign on and be aware that this is obviously important to us. And then I again will inform McCog that this is something that we'd like to pursue as well. And we'll go ahead and do that with staff's concurrence and Chairman Bueller's concurrence. So, thank you. And then Pete had a presentation. He too wanted to provide us during the legislative update. Oh, and can I real quickly to Alicia, while I'm thinking of that, just to put it in perspective of where we are, McHenry County is with regard to solar farms. Alicia, can you just real quickly give us the information that you dug out for me too, with regard to what other counties are experiencing with applications for solar farms?
Yes. In the year 2023, Lake County has experienced 7 different solar facilities coming into being. However, they have not gone through their commission yet. They're still in progress. In Will County, you are looking at 5 different facilities that came through, 3 of which have been approved and 3 that are still in the commission. Just to give you an idea of the difference, 219 and some odd change acres have already been approved in Will County in the year 2023, with an additional 58 acres coming on, probably most likely within the next month. In King County, you only have 2 that have come through. I don't know the acreage on that one. As for Lake County's acreage, they're approximately 20 acres a pop, and for a total of 150 acres. So large discrepancy.
Yeah, huge discrepancy. So I wanted to, again, I think that that's the only reason why there may be some traction in being able to carve that out, is because we are such an outlier. And the comment I got from one of the bill sponsors is when I sent him the information was, oh my, oh my. And so I said, obviously you didn't anticipate this. So, okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Mr. Austin.
Yeah, and I will be quick. We're kind of going a little impromptu, but one of the items that we're going to start to hear a lot more about is what's going on with the RTA. We know that commuter patterns have changed and Metro is suffering in terms of ridership. We know that Metro is very important to McHenry County, so that's why we need to keep our eye on this. But it's not just Metro, it's PACE and CTA, but for us, it's really Metro. What's happening from a timing perspective is, as I think we've reported, CMAP was charged by the General Assembly with coming up with some options for the RTA revamp. RTA is going to run out of the money it's operating on to cover the ridership deficit at the end of '25. So we're looking in the neighborhood of $700 million that needs to be, new money needs to come from somewhere, whether that's riders that come back or different sorts of sales taxes, different sorts of states bailouts, different sorts of federal bailouts. And it's probably a myriad of all those options, right? But CMAP is charged with coming up with some options.
Can I ask you a quick question so I can stay with you? Do you mean the option, the 700 million is just RTA, or it's the whole system?
It's the whole system.
Whole system.
The whole
Okay.
system, right. Thank you. We still have over 2 years, but CMAP has just a matter of months to put forward their recommendations. And CMAP had a meeting 13 days ago where they started to talk about some of the recommendations. They didn't get very far. It was a little bit of a frustrating meeting. Scott Hennings and I had a virtual meeting with Leanne Redden, the executive director of RTA, 12 days ago to kind of talk a little bit about these things. CMAP staff came out and visited with Scott and I and Carolyn Schofield last week. And this is the plan they present. There's too much for you to digest now. Just take it home and have fun with it. We've kind of been talking about how do we start to engage the whole county board in thinking about these options. These options are options for the General Assembly. They aren't your decisions. But I think the General Assembly would like to hear which ones are more palatable to McHenry County, which ones are more palatable to the collar counties is probably the better way to look at it. What are the 5 collars of the RTA 1? CMAP's recommendations are going to be put forward in a draft form, I believe on September 13th. I think Chairman Bueller is planning to attend that meeting of the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, and the CMAP board. And then I think we're anticipating a vote on October the 13th. That's again a joint meeting of the MPO and the CMAP board. Then it gets pushed to the General Assembly. Then it's see what happens in 24 and 25 and looking at all these options. But it's going to start to bubble up. We're going to start to hear a lot more conversation about where these dollars are coming from. It can't all come from fares. You'll price ridership down even farther. But there's lots of different options. It's kind of a series of difficult choices. A lot of the least bad options, and that's from where you sit. That's kind of the lenses that you're looking through. Lots of things to think about. This is a first little sample of what some of those things are. I believe at this point, and this is tentative, we're going to have a little bit of a discussion with the committee of the whole at the July COW meeting, so it's 16 days from now. I think we're targeting Scott Hennings and Carolyn to kind of do a little bit of discussion with all of these things for you guys at that point, but that's in pencil at this point. So,
Is there, my only question is one, is there any consideration during these discussions about specifically how the money is going to be allocated throughout the RTA so that we're ensuring if we support any particular option, that the money actually comes back to our Metro as opposed to the CTA and everything that's in the downtown area?
I think those are part of the discussions, and but the answers are still elusive. But yeah, we just want to preserve our trains.
I get it, and
we're putting in a lot of money.
And don't want to promise anything and ask or support anything without knowing that we are doing exactly that.
And that's why I think it's hopeful that we can have some of these conversations with DePage and Lake and Kane and Wilk, who are in more similar situations to us. And while they have a little bit more PACE service, but still it's largely Metrocentric in terms of the service they're getting. So we can the 5 collars speaking with a common voice is a pretty powerful. That's millions of people. So, okay. Thank you.
I would just ask that those kinds of conversations, as you have them, that we get updates at this committee periodically and where it's going and what's
Appreciate
happening.
that.
And yeah.
The RTA was doing the Transportation Tuesdays, so today's the last one, today at 12 noon, it's a Zoom, but they record them, so you can go back. The one on mobility hubs was actually pretty cool. I mean, it's kind of more suited for more populated areas, but today they're talking about their capital improvements, so.
And last Friday, Shayla and I spoke to the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus in Barrington. So they had 50 mayors there, and before us was Erin Hellman from CTH. She had much more time and much more interest, frankly, I think.
Of course.
But no, she was talking to those mayors, and she was thinking, what does your downtown look like if metro service is reduced? You know, and so it was a good discussion. Thanks.
Thank you. I am moving on routine consent agenda. Does anybody want anything removed or discussed? If not, can I have a motion to approve the routine consent agenda? Mr. Shorten, seconded by Mr. Kunkel. Money. Is it money? Yes. All right, roll call, please, Cam. Sorry.
Campbell,
Yes.
Kunkel,
Yes.
Wagner,
Yes.
Shorten,
Yes.
Altough.
Yes. We have no presentations. We have no old business. Discussion. 24 budget.
I'm gonna ask,
Should never-
I just texted Carrie, she's gonna come right down. Let's go
okay.
right to Seth if you would mind.
Okay, no, absolutely. Seth, you want to come up and
Now
join
I
us
wanna
and
kick
bring
this-
whomever else?
Kick this off. You know, in the county board strategic plan, there's a call to periodically look at programs and kind of do some measurement on are we getting out of these programs what we wanted and what we're thinking about. We've been a little bit slow to move on this, but we've got several that we're going to be working on in the next couple of months and trying to do some of this discussion at all of the standing committees. Seth and court services are unique in that they are kind of a branch of the state government and state employees as much as they are county employees, but they also do a fantastic job with data and it's so good at measuring what they're doing and so I was very comfortable in wanting to kind of start this process and working with Seth and what they're doing. And he'll tell you more about this, but you know, drug testing has been a big part of what they do. You know, post-adjudication, and they made the change a while back to privatize this drug testing, and so I wanted Seth to talk just a little bit about why they made the change, what positive things they thought they were going to see, and how are they going to measure that they got those positive things. So I really appreciate Seth stepping up. We're not going to answer all the questions today, but he's going to show you the questions that they're going to be looking at and talking about that. So thank you, Seth.
And again, just background information, you remember strategic plan, we talked about how we evaluate and measure programs to determine whether we invest in them continually or whether we don't. So thank you for kind of being a test case pilot program idea, so.
Absolutely. I enjoy the opportunity to speak with you all and kind of talk about what we're doing over there in probation. So the drug testing program. Before I get into what it is right now, I just want to do like 2 minutes of history. So just to refresh all of your memories or give you new information if you haven't heard this before. But so historically we would, and I don't have a lot of slides or information for you to show yet. We do Pete's right, we collect a ton of information, but we've got a couple other projects going over there right now that kind of drew us away. But what I'll tell you is this, historically, as a department, we purchased our own supplies, drug testing supplies, and each officer would conduct their own drug tests with their clients. That worked fine for a long time, and it wasn't a huge spend year over year. But as we moved into the early 2000s and the 2010s, we saw the opioid epidemic coming on full force, and it continues to today. And the system's response to that, though, was to increase testing, and that's why I want to show you guys this first slide. So back in 2013, we did a total of 19,288 drug tests a year. That's alcohol and drug tests. There's not even alcohol captured there. But if you look to 2021, which is the last full year I have, at least in this chart, 58,000 drug tests. So a humongous uptick in a fairly short amount of time. And that is in the pretrial realm. We see a lot more drug testing, like weekly drug testing while they're awaiting trial for adults. Same with juveniles while they await disposition of their case. And then in the disposition or the sentenced side of things, we see standard probation orders that have weekly drug testing for the first 90 or 180 days of a 2-year sentence. If the person fails a drug test, typically the court order will say weekly drug testing for the remainder of the probation sentence. So then we've got 2 years of weekly drug testing for a client, which is a lot. In the problem-solving court world, the best practices are to test frequently and often. And so there's, as you guys probably are aware, we have drug court, mental health court, and a DUI court. And so each of those programs has somewhere between 25 to 40 to maybe even 60 participants. And each of them needs at least 2 drug tests a week. So it adds up in a big hurry. So what we saw, though, as the system's response was more testing. What that meant for my officers was more time doing drug tests and less time doing the stuff that I talked to you guys about back in February or March when we talked about ethics and how to do it differently in probation. I will argue to you and to anybody else that will listen to it that while drug testing is an important and a vital part of the equation, the bigger piece is what we're trying to do over there with cognitive behavioral reform of thinking and behavior change. And so I wanted my officers to spend more time doing that stuff and not all, inordinate amounts of time doing drug testing. So in about 2020, after staff came back from initial pandemic closures and all that kind of stuff, we tried something different than every officer doing their own testing. We used 4 officers who are our low-risk administrative officers to handle that, and they split their day. Basically, 2 officers would do drug testing in the AM, 2 in the PM. And in their downtime from doing drug testing, they would do their administrative and low-risk probation work. It worked okay for a while, and 2020, as we all know, was a really weird time for everybody, so we just kind of made it work the best we could. What we did see through the pandemic, though, was a lot of staffing challenges, which continue to today as well. And so keeping a team of 4 in these positions was not easy. And you really need males and females because our testing needs to be observed. And so it was really difficult to find 2 females that we could keep in and 2 males and work that and also prepare them, because we also had standard officers leaving out of our ranks to go do other things or retire or whatever. So to prepare those low-risk administrative officers for standard probation work when half of their day was dedicated to drug testing was very difficult to do. So we kind of muddled through 2020. And in 2021, we had some additional challenges. Our drug court, as you know, is a mentor court for across the United States. What that means is that problem solving and other drug courts from all around the U.S. come to see our drug court and see how it operates. What that means for us is that we really need to follow best practices when it comes to testing as a piece of that program. And what that means is truly randomized, which means equal likelihood of testing 7 days a week. Historically, we did all our testing Monday through Friday. And if Judge Fedier were sitting here, he would say, that's not enough. That's a huge gap in our problem, or in our program. And so we needed to find a way to have 7 days a week of testing. There are a bunch of challenges that come with 7 days a week. The government center is not open 7 days a week. We initially proposed this to our staff, and there was a lot of resistance with some reasonable, with some fairness to it, I guess, because it's an imposition to give up some of your days. And your weekend days. So we also looked at the total cost. Just give me a minute to get here. So we tried to look at, if we were to do this with staff and your weekends, what would that look like? And so, again, not a great presentation for you guys or clean slides or anything, but what we did was look at our cost that it would be for staff to do this. So we have 2 probation officer salaries there, fringe benefits for 2. Some of our samples have to go to labs for confirmation, so there's that cost and all the supply costs. Those were our traditional just cups and test strips and all that. So $175,000 to do business as it currently existed in 2020 and before. We looked into randomizing software. There's a bunch of vendors out there that provide you just with the software to use on your own, and that was about $25,000 a year. We calculated some overtime costs and some additional supply costs. So the grand total ended us up at about $218,000 a year when you consider staff time and all the additional expenses. It's a big spend, but it's probably not, I mean, other than the weekend expense there, $175 is about what we were spending a year to do drug testing Monday through Friday. But like I said, the problem-solving court really wanted us to have this true best practice in randomized testing on weekends, and we were finding that it wasn't a good use of our staff time. These are college-educated probation officers to spend that much time collecting urine. So we went out to the market through an RFP to see what was out there. There are some other counties around us that use vendors. Winnebago is one that uses a vendor to do their drug testing. And a lot of the other callers have some sort of tech or something that they employ, and some do have vendors. But we wanted to go see what was out there. So we put out an RFP, and we had a couple, 3 or 4 responses back. But the one that we selected was a company called Corrective Solutions. Corrective Solutions is based out of California, Mission Viejo, I believe, although I believe they were just moving their location this year. And the things that drew our attention to them in particular were that they were able to offer us, so traditionally when we bought supplies, we would buy cups for urine collection and then dipsticks that you put in there to test for different substances. Our tests that we historically bought were a 3-panel test: cocaine, opiates, THC. What Corrective Solutions offered us was a 13-panel test. So they test for 13 different substances for the same price as what we were paying for our 3 panels. So right away it was like, oh boy, okay, this is going to be better. Because what clients like to do is substance hop, right? So if they know you're going to test for these things, then they'll go over here and you'll never know that I'm messing around. And so a 13-panel lets us know a lot more about what they're doing, and it covers most substances that are drugs of abuse out there. And Corrective can also offer us, individual tests for different substances that aren't part of the 13-panel test. Excuse me. They have, as part of their overall offering, they have a randomization application that they use. So all the client's information goes into their application or system, and completely randomizes when these clients are prompted to come and test. And that is a process, and I won't go into the depth of it with you guys, but some clients we set up to be tested randomly twice a week, and some clients we set up as frequently as once a year if they really don't have a strong testing need. We just need to meet the court order requirement for testing. But the vendor offered that. They are affiliated with Abbott Labs, which is local to us, and one of the Abbott subsidiaries is Redwood Labs, which we've always used. That's the vendor we've used for our laboratory services forever. And so that was a nice familiarity and connection for us. The thing that really sealed it for us, though, is Corrective was able to offer on-site testers. So Corrective Solutions employs testers to come to be in our facility Monday through Friday, and they also work on the weekends at Woodstock Police Department. And I'll talk about Woodstock PD in a minute. But those folks do all the testing for us. My officers do not do testing anymore. They might do some on a late night or out in the field or something like that, but these vendors do the testing. And when the vendors do it, and this is not to say my officers didn't do this, but the vendors are always following industry best practices. So they check the person in using their photo ID, which is really important when you are dealing with like an instanter test. So the court sends somebody down and says, take a test and then come back to court. When they're your client, you know who they are, right? But when they're just a random person that comes in for a test, check in to make sure you are who you say you are is really important. They go into the room with the client. We did have observation ports in our drug testing bathrooms, but these testers go into the room with them and they directly observe the person providing a sample. I won't go into the explicit details with you guys on that, but I will tell you that men are made to show their parts so that we know that they're not tampering. And if you have time and a secure internet connection, you could look up a Wizinator. It's a product out there that people use to defraud drug tests. It goes along with fake urine samples, and it's fooled a lot of people, let's just say that. But they observe the clients giving screens, and they have a whole process for sealing, containing the sample, and saving it for sending to the lab if it's necessary, and or getting a admission of use if the client tests positive, and or working with the officer to get the officer involved. So the ideal state is the officer is not involved in the testing if and until the client tests positive and denies the use, and then at that point we try to bring that officer to see what's going on with the client, because they have that rapport and relationship. But those industry best practices, which do include, as I kind of alluded to before, the randomization of testing. So what we had previously was officers would schedule appointments with their client, and if you came in for a test, you were gonna, or I'm sorry, if you came in for an appointment, you were probably gonna get a test today. And if you were somebody who was looking to manipulate the system, you'd know to not use for a couple of days leading up to that appointment, and then you'd be all clear. So this completely separates office appointments from testing. So implementation, initial implementation did have some challenges, as all do, I think. But we were able to use something that we started just last year as well, implementation teams within our department. We call them work groups, but basically we selected a cross-section of our staff. So looking to get people from every position type within the department to come in around a topic and talk about how we make it work successfully. And the real core idea behind that is I don't want to create ideas at the top and shove them down and have people say, this doesn't work. Why didn't nobody ask us? This cross-section of staff allows the staff to give input about what's going to work and how it is at the line level and in reality. And then we implement those ideas and put them to work so that, ideally we hit the ground running with a solution that is going to work for everybody. In this example, that work group worked wonderfully because we did have all those kind of, initial bumps and hurdles to get over, but I think we've worked through a good chunk of them. So, flash forward about 9 months, that's 9 to 10 months. We started in mid-August of last year. So what I can tell you so far, we have much greater visibility on no shows and no calls. Clients, sometimes clients will call the call-in line and then they just don't show up. And historically, that probably would have just been a rescheduled appointment. We'll catch you on the drug test next time. Now we know that they've missed a test, which lets us kind of wonder, why would you miss a test? It could be a completely legitimate reason, car broke down or whatever, or it could be that you're trying to scam the system and get on a test because you know you used. As I kind of alluded to before with the 13 panel tests, we kind of get a better handle on that substance hopping. So we know when clients are switching substances and trying different things. Part of our process and our learnings through this has been around prescriptions. We knew about prescriptions before, but now that our case management system and our process involves knowing exactly what the prescription that they have is and how long it's valid for. So if you have a Norco prescription, which is an opiate, you're going to test positive for opiates. And that's valid because the doctor gave it to you for pain. But it's not valid in a month from now if you had 1 week of prescription. And so having a better handle on that helps us to work with the client in that game playing that happens sometimes with scripts. We have a much, much, much better idea of cost per client type. So I talked about needing to do testing for pretrial clients, standard probation clients, adult and juvenile, and those problem-solving court clients. We have a much better idea now of what that costs per client because the vendor's able to identify the type of client that's getting the test, and then they send us billing accordingly. we have a much better idea of positivity rates of those who come in for tests. And then we can slice that against all kinds of stuff, the type of client, the phase of problem-solving court that they're in, you name it. I think there's no, what is it, the sky's the limit as far as what we can probably cut against the data that we're getting from the vendor now. So lots of good things. It's still a work in progress, as all things are, and we're still making adjustments to our internal processes. So one of the things that we've found is that we do have a really high no-show rate, meaning clients are supposed to be there but don't. And so trying to come up with clear and consistent guidance for the staff about what to do about those no-show rates. And that is a work in progress as well. As far as the budget, and probably should, Dan, if we can take that down. I don't have any other slides for you guys, but when we came to you, almost a year or more ago, we estimated needing about $210,000 for the vendor. Year to date, we're at about $87,000 spent, which is actually less than we anticipated, and it's looking like, in round numbers, and second half of the year will be interesting, maybe somewhere in the $175,000 to $185,000 range, which is coming in under budget, which is wonderful, on the cost of the vendors for their supplies and their time. The lab piece is a little higher than we anticipated, but only by a couple $1,000s. So in total, we're going to come out probably $30,000, ahead of what we had planned for this overall undertaking, which is wonderful. Why is it a lower number? I think we were probably over-testing clients before when we were doing our own testing. That could be a piece of it. I think that no-show rate being as high as 25% is a big piece. We told the vendor somewhere between 12 to 13,000 tests a year, and it's looking more like 11,000 right now. But as we work on that no-show rate and bring in more people, the number will probably go up. So in the future, some of the things that we're going to look at are so the vendor has their system. It's called SnapView. That's that randomized process, and all the client information goes in there. We have our case management system. We call it R2. Those two systems need to be fully integrated. The work is being done to our system so that we can integrate, and the vendor has been great about making modifications to their system per our requests and needs. But the goal is by this fall to be integrated between those two systems so that the officers can spend all of their time in our case management system, making any edits that they need to, and it just feeds over to the vendor system. And in reverse, when the vendor does their testing and puts their information in, it flows right back to us. We'd like to find a fully secured location for the weekend. So I kind of alluded to this before, but we are currently using the Woodstock Police Department for the weekend testing. Chief Lee has been one of the greatest partners we could ever ask for. And I'll use his words. He said that he believes that this makes the entire community a safer place, so why would we not do it? So really thankful to Chief Lee and his whole team over there. But they are able to do weekends over there. If that's long-term tenable, I'm not entirely sure yet. It's wonderful, but I think it is a little bit of an imposition on the Woodstock PD on the weekends. So one of the things that we've been looking at is Block 6 over here, which is the old jail. It's currently a training space that the sheriff uses, and we've had some discussions with the sheriff's office about it. It's kind of been on hold for a little bit, but we're exploring the idea of using that location maybe even 7 days a week, Monday through Friday as well, and not having anything but just the instanter testing when the court sends somebody down to us and says, get a test right now and come back to court. So things to explore there. But that would, if we used Block 6, it could include weekends and holidays there as well, just have it all in one spot. So we're going to explore that this fall. And then I would say finally to you guys, I talked a little bit about the different data or the different visibility that we're getting in working with the vendor. So we want to start to use that information a little more proactively. So how many negative tests before somebody is unlikely to use it, right? I'm sure there's not a magic number necessarily, but there's a trend that you can look at. So if we can find that and then start to reduce testing, it reduces cost for us, and is also a better use of the resources for those folks who do need a whole bunch of testing. As far as problem-solving reports, you know, they promote through phases in those programs. So using testing is a crucial part of that. It's you know, in each of those reports, sobriety is a crucial element. And so using that testing information as part of the phase promotion and graduation process. And I'm sure that they will, I would imagine the court will be very on board with that.
What about the no-shows? Is there a way to make a measurement there too, to see if that can be improved for someone?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. We're looking at, we've already developed kind of a matrix of, you know, how many, the risk level of the client, and then whether it's their first, second, third, fourth no-show, and the action that we can take. And so initially, obviously, we want to work with the person and help them, you know, motivate them as best as we can to get in there, knock down any barrier. If it's a transportation issue, we've got a wrong phone number and they just didn't get the message, whatever. There's a million different circumstances that come up every day when you work with clients. But having a consistent process so that we don't ignore that first one and get to a second one and the third one. But ultimately, we do have to bring people back to court when they're not showing up for tests. And sometimes that's enough to motivate them to start complying. I'll be honest, some people just, you know, they'll push it right to the edge until the judge threatens the Department of Corrections. And so we are looking at ways to improve that number. And we will certainly, that's one thing we're absolutely keeping a very close eye on, is the no-show rate and how to improve it. But, you know, where we can, we would like to incentivize people, and usually that's done through less testing. So as they test negative more, you know, we'd like to back off and use the resource a little less with those folks. So that's kind of the gist of it for me today. Again, I apologize that I didn't have a more thorough and full presentation for you guys. But
You gave me a lot more than I thought, Seth.
Very good, thank you.
That was great. Thank you. I thought we, yeah. You can see why I have a lot of confidence. When we do bring back
Perfect,
the complete
yeah.
evaluation, he's going to touch on a lot of things.
All right, perfect. No, thank you very much.
Can you delete those?
Okay?
All right.
Presentation.
Just wanted
Budget.
to touch base quick. At your next meeting, we will be starting to bring forward a handful of department budgets. This committee sees several. And when we had a discussion 3-4 weeks ago with the finance committee was maybe asking that these budget presentations look a little different than they have in the past and maybe be a little bit more abbreviated. I think, but I want that to be your decision about what you want the presentations to look like. Clearly, everyone did all of our offices and departments that report through this committee did an introduction to their services and who they are and the kinds of work that they do earlier in the year. We did that in the first quarter of fiscal 23. So to me, it makes sense maybe we ask that work, that kind of presentation just be put to the side. But I wanted to hear from you, because historically we've really given the offices and departments a fair amount of latitude in what they want to present. This is your time to present to committee. What do you want to show them that you're doing, aside from the budget? Any thoughts on that?
Kelly, can I ask you kind of to give us a little bit of background about what the finance committee was thinking?
Yes, so as Pete said, we spend a lot of time sometimes on all of these budgets, and after a while, it's not like we stop listening, but yeah, it's hard to take all the information. And we thought it would be better to listen to the actual budget and what they want to do with that budget, and instead of them talking about their department, because we all heard, and yeah, it's a good refresher, but we all hear what they do at the beginning. And to put it bluntly, one person said, we don't need to listen to why people should be elected again. So, or stay ahead of their department. So we just thought we should be focusing on the budget, and that way we can have a better conversation about the actual numbers instead of what their department does.
I'm all about that.
I absolutely concur. Just the facts, ma'am. Just see the hard numbers. That's
Focus
it.
on the numbers, what's changing, what do you anticipate
And
changing,
if there's
what's
another
driving the
question, I'm
changes.
assuming we can go back and
Yes.
ask. Right.
And I anticipated that response, but I wanted to be somewhat deferential. Carrie and I did have this conversation with our department heads last Friday? 2 Fridays? Anyway, we set them up that we should probably look for a little bit more of an abbreviated presentation. We like to see the bomb dog, but maybe we don't need to bring the dog.
Yeah, I don't need to see the dog again. I can go to one of the demos. But I do think that would be much more valuable to everybody to see that kind of comparison index. And right.
There's still, in our award-winning GFOA budget document, there's a requirement that we have goals and highlights and that we have some measurements, and I think we're still
We'll
going.
still include that in your packet, but we'll just tell them in the presentation.
Yeah, we can read.
You can read it if you have questions.
Right. Thank you.
Thank
That
you.
would be perfect.
Yeah, I checked it out, we just got the award yesterday.
And then I just want real quickly, the short-term rental ordinance. This is more Airbnb, Verbo. McHenry County has an ordinance, but it's pretty broad and it is not a requirement. It's kind of sort of, if you want to register, you can, and it's limited to 12 times per year. I only bring it up because it really should be discussed at PED, but we're the legislative committee. I get, because I live by the river, I get a zillion phone calls every summer. I get nothing during winter. But as soon as that weather breaks and people have access to property on the river and boats, etc., that's when all the neighbors all of a sudden realize that property has been vacant and is not being used. I don't know if we want to focus in on this, if there's no interest in it, but if there is, I would ask PED also to kind of take a look and make some recommendations and see where we go from here. Kelly?
So I would assume every municipality has their own ordinance, so we would only be in unincorporated.
And most of the complaints that I'm getting, again, along the river are all from unincorporated areas. And it really is summertime. It all revolves around the fact that now everybody's outside and they've recognized. And a lot of it is, weekend rentals, little bachelor parties and wedding parties and parties. So.
Slippery slope, though. We're talking about the solar, letting them do with their properties, and now we're going to tell these people to do their properties the other way? Leases are leases.
No,
right?
I don't think that's what and I didn't recommend that for solar either. What I'm suggesting is if there's interest, is that if you are going to do it, then you need to register. And the municipalities never thought of that. Maybe what we can do is check with some of them and see what they require. But this is more of a voluntary issue, and so nobody really knows if the property next door to you is being rented out. You can make that assumption when you see different people there every weekend. But I mean, and maybe there's no interest. Maybe it's not that wide of a county issue, and it really just kind of sort of does go along with river property and usage of that nature. I just wanted to bring it up because, again, I seriously, I get more phone calls about that than I do about solar or slaughterhouses. So I just, I want to be able to say that, yes, it occurs, but, we think what we have in place is viable enough for all of us.
I mean, I think that,
No, that's okay. And then Carol.
okay. I think that, like anything, people can do things with their property, and as long as you're not having, wild parties by different groups of people every weekend, no one's going to care. I think it might be worth considering or doing a comparison of what the municipalities have in place, see if there is any standard language, and if their standard language is more strict, less strict than the county, and then kind of do that info gathering and go from there.
I think that's a great idea, too. I do. So thank you, Carolyn.
Yeah, I was gonna say we can do something that PED could be looking at as well. I mean, there are different.
It'll have to go through their committee.
Yeah, right, and I hope I didn't give the impression that I think personally that we should allow property owners to do whatever they want with their property. I mean, it's just a conversation we have kind of like always in PED about land use and, you know, who gets to do what, okay? So I'm hoping I'm not giving the wrong impression, but yeah, I'd be open to looking at that.
I never want to cross that line either, but there comes a point in time where what you're doing infringes upon, you know, a broader segment, and so, but I think that that's enough direction right now. We'll go ahead and put some information together and bring that back, and then maybe go to P&D and see if there's some interest from that level. That's all I was really looking for today.
To me, this also, it seems like it might be incorporated in the noise ordinance, especially if it's after hours.
Noise ordinance?
Just wondering if I would. It's sort of, it's inseparable. I mean, particularly these residences on the river, these lots are 40 feet wide or whatever they are. You can practically touch the neighbors sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's really the problem in some.
Well,
We had
there's some
of this.
septic issues and some things of that nature that you
And
may want to
fireworks
think
and all that
about.
stuff goes on.
Yeah,
I mean, there is a noise ordinance in place. It is not really enforced by the sheriff's office. The sheriff's office has taken the position generally that there are other tools. They have enough tools in their toolbox. But the state's attorney's office remains the enforcer of the noise ordinance. We had a complainant earlier this month. Went right to the chairman, and I kind of got involved, and I was thrilled with Sheriff Tatelman's response, and he's kind of said, well, it's warming up. It's complain on your neighbor's season, and this was his first season as sheriff in this, and he really pushed his leadership to kind of really standardize the response on noise complaints. And this is how you do a disorderly conduct. This is how you work with state's attorneys on a noise ordinance, and they all revisited the subject, and we're going to be consistent in our response. And I was very appreciative of the sheriff's response.
I really am just kind of suggesting that at least the property next door is going to be utilized for this, right? That's just kind of sort of, and making sure that the health codes are met, et cetera. So that's all I was really thinking about. Not stopping people from, seeing as how I'm a big user of both, I don't want to stop that.
Well, isn't there something in our zoning or the P&D when they talk about septic systems? I mean, I know that you can only have a certain number of bedrooms for a septic system, so you would think that could be applied through that way too.
You could, but you have to know. And it's a voluntary registration, and that's what, exactly, Kelly, that's what I'm suggesting, is that maybe it's not, maybe we require, if you're gonna do it, fine, do it. But you need to register, and we need to then have some way to measure compliance. That's all.
What's the incentive to register? Because if you're registering, you're just kind of saying, hey, guess what, I'm flagged out here. If you don't register,
Then we prohibit. I don't think we would. That's what you're saying, but
just, I'm playing devil's advocate.
Yeah,
Just
I
kind
know.
of-
We
you're
ran
right,
across a
you're
lake home a few weeks ago, or not lake home, river home. It's owned by 3 different parties, right? And they just use it. 3 different couples use that home. I bet it's a good.
I got it right down the street.
Nobody lives there, but there's always people there.
Yeah.
Well, the registration, of course, then would have to be filed behind rules of compliance with it back up the registration, right? So this is pretty complicated.
It is.
I think it
And
needs to
like
be
I said,
done, definitely, because like you,
It's never
I'm
easy.
close to the river too.
I know you are.
I'm getting all these
I actually
calls.
looked at you.
And we're having all these explosions, and people say, what they do in Madison, I don't regulate that. They blow stuff up,
But
that's
again,
all I
I
can
think,
tell you.
I blow your dogs under the bed. I think again, it's all in how, you present those things. It's a shame we have to do this, but unfortunately, it's become
Necessary.
a broader use, and, just to ensure that people know what you're doing and that you're complying, and yes, you're the good guy, but you're the bad guy, and, that's typically what happens. So I just wanted to see if there was interest in pursuing some kind of, and I got it, so thank you very much. Do we need an executive session? No. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Matt, seconded by Michael. All those in favor say aye.
We're done.